Mark here for another phenomenal Wisdom and Knowledge 5 podcast episode, and I bring on Herbert Hildebrandt. Now, Herbert, you were, a part of history. Your church was actually locked up, and you had to meet outside during, the COVID era. And so government overreach at its best. And with what just happened in Canada, you have a stance that, government is not the way out, voting is not the way out. Let's dive deeper into that.
Thanks again, Mark, for having me. It's
Hmm.
great to be back. It's been a little bit, but yeah, crazy to think what's happened in the last 5 years now, and all the things that happened 4 years ago this month. Yeah, they closed down our church by court order for the egregious crime of meeting in a building to worship God. So that was it. So time has passed since then, and as you said, we find ourselves a day after an election here in Canada. An election that was very interestingly overshadowed. It was effectively an election about Donald Trump,
Hmm.
and how he was viewed in the Canadian media and the Canadian elite, and by largely the boomer generation. That's really what defined this election. Uh, Interesting enough, in Canada, there's been a major shift. The most conservative demographics are now 18 to 45. And I think you've seen some of that in the United States as well. But the cost of living, the egregious financial reckless policies that have been in place for decades now by ostensibly conservative and liberal governments have caught up with younger people. And there's also a search for some semblance of truth and someone telling the truth, I think, with the younger generation. So it was interesting that we really saw this in this election, that if this election had been decided by younger people, there would have been a tremendous shift towards what's traditionally political conservatism. And the people standing primarily in the way of that happening were older, wealthier women and men, but primarily women and I guess in a lot of cases their husbands. But the the policies of the last 10 years, which in Canada we call the lost decade, because we are dead last in developed countries on growth. We were always in the top three for years and years. We are now dead last in the last 10 years under Justin Trudeau. But it has tremendously and disproportionately benefited older people that had real estate investments. The cost of real estate has, in many cases, quadrupled in Canada in the last 10 years. Minimum, it has doubled. Typically, it has tripled, and in many cases, it's quadrupled. And that has driven up the book value of the portfolios and real estate portfolios of older retired people. And again, I'm not hating on older retired people. It's the
No.
generation of my parents.
Hmm.
My parents, thank God, are of a very sound mind and have, I'm a product of their upbringing, and so my view on life is really theirs. But I'm sorry, I'm probably rambling here a little bit, but it's the contextual case of this election was really Donald Trump tariffs and 51st state, and driving fear into an older crowd that still watches TV nonstop.
Hmm.
And if you watch TV news in Canada, it's just orange man bad. United States is here they're our aggressor. We need to stop our relationship. We need to end what we've had. And it's fear, 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 fear all the time. Same
Hmm.
playbook as COVID, right? And it really captured the same demographic.
Sure. And I mean, they have the same, things going on here. It's almost like both of us, US and Canada, and I just interviewed a friend in Montreal who said we have no ill will towards, Americans, and we need to, scratch the surface on that. But it's like all main, whether it be ABC News or, any of Fox, any of the outlets, that's what they're playing. You know what I mean? Like almost Canada versus US.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Hmm.
It's not based in reality, and that's what's unfortunate, is that we're just experiencing over and over again these these elections, these news cycles that are entirely constructed by people that do not have our best interests in mind.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's not, it's not what God would want us to be, focusing on. I don't understand. I mean, it was mind-boggling that so many people, so many Christians, complied during 2020 and bought into everything, and how they comply into, ushering into things like Agenda 2030, because it's coming that way. So many people are compliant, and they're thinking that it's a good thing. Like I was recently in Columbus, Ohio, and on the store signs they were saying, vote for call your representative, vote for this, and vote for this now. The sustainability goals and getting it to come now.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I wrote a piece recently on the issue, and I titled it that you cannot vote your way out of this mess, and you may have seen that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's been something that's been on my mind. It was a product of something that I've considered for a long time, and to me, and this is not necessarily a denigration of a politician because politicians do what politicians do. So I'm not knocking them. I
Hmm.
have friends that are politicians. There's some politicians that I really do respect. Um, so this is not a knock against them, but what I wrote there was politicians are not moral giants. They're crowd readers. They watch the polls, they study the trends, they keep a finger in the wind and the other on their reelection strategy. That's what you do. I mean, the point of being a politician many times is that, well, you get to stay a politician, at least for some period of time, right? So, and especially as Christians, what the point that we've missed entirely is we've outsourced this responsibility to influence culture to our respective capitals and our politicians. And
Hmm.
that has to stop. Well, if we don't stop it, what we have now will not be stopped.
Hmm.
That's just a fact. Um, Politics is downstream from culture, culture is downstream from faith. And so, if you want to change the direction of society, you have to go to the source. It's the church, the pulpit, you and I, as believers. The state of our culture is a direct result of the weakness in our faith communities. What we witnessed during COVID, what we're witnessing now, is we Christian leaders, they fill the pulpits across the country. They're far more concerned with being liked than being right. And in fact, they are politicians. That's the problem.
Hmm.
They're not actually leaders. It is historically unpopular to be a truth-telling person of faith. It's extremely unpopular and often fatal to be a person that preaches the truth entirely. Now, we live in a society right now where at this point, you're safe. That has not always been the case. I got back from Europe last night. I took my oldest three children, my wife, and we toured sites. We were in Rome, Zurich, Switzerland, Amsterdam, different cities where some, in the case of Antwerp, Belgium, my direct ancestors were killed, burned at the stake in the towns, in the city squares for telling the truth. They were
Hmm.
too radical in their beliefs for what the status at that time would allow. So it wasn't the government that killed them. It was either the Reformed or the Catholic Church at the time,
Yeah. Okay.
right? So our primary persecution source when you're telling the truth is generally not secular authorities. It's religious people that hold power over secular authorities.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And it's so like sad to see because things like I remember I used to respect someone like Pastor Greg Laurie. I don't know if you remember him out of Southern
I do.
California. And then he's advocating for the shots and saying, look, this is not the mark of the beast and all this. And and it's sad because he had a good like book, like a pamphlet where you could, help someone to get saved called How to Live Forever. But then it's like,
Mhm.
these people come out of the woodwork and you see who they really are, and it's like, what is going on, you know?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's where push comes to shove. It's what you do under pressure. It's not what you do when you're popular, or what you do when nobody cares. The question is, what do you do when it really matters, right? And quite frankly, this is just my experience. and I wish I was wrong, and if somebody can show me that I'm wrong, that would be fantastic because this would be the right time to be wrong, is that the bulk of Christians, the bulk of Christian leaders are not willing to put their lives or their heads, so to say, on the line reputationally or physically um, for what is considered unpopular truth.
Hmm. Yeah, and another thing too that we should touch upon is like, and we're not like anti this or anti that, like government, police,
No.
you name it. And one thing that you and your family has always done, even when they were, coming in and taking your church, is you were always respectful to, police and authority. I mean, yeah, and we see all this overreach, in both countries and worldwide of police. And it's been going on for ages, but COVID really brought it out of the woodwork. For me, it was funny because I've been here in North Carolina a couple of years, and as soon as I moved here, I'm the biggest go by the books. So I got my plates transferred over on my car, and the first week I get shaken down by this state trooper for no reason. And he was just having me do the walk like you're drunk, and like me, I barely even drink. So it was like, I've never done this before. And then just like ask me questions like, where'd you go to college? What are you doing? What do and like this, that, and the other. And it's like, you shouldn't be asking me. But me being, a follower of Christ, I was cordial as could be, as polite. But then, it's funny at the end, they let me off scot-free. They wound up calling in a supervisor to come and meet him there and talk to me. They went that far. And I was just like, I shook his hand. I'm like, what's your name? And they wouldn't even give me their name. They're like triple dog six. It's sad to see that type of, attitude from them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we've lost largely in society. Um, we've lost the ability to have intentional dialogue that's productive,
Hmm.
that respects each other, that allows for the possibility that we won't always agree, um, and yet be respectful to each other, right? COVID really brought that to a forefront really quickly because people thought that they could get away with it. And once they
Hmm.
thought they could get away with it, their true colors became very clear very quickly. Whether that was police, whether it was people, ratting on each other, government, people immediately flexed as far as they thought that they could. And that's where it was really shocking to me. People that I knew had known for a long time, they just became really, really ugly really quickly.
Hmm.
And it was, I still haven't really gotten over that. Um, it's remarkable how there, tolerance goes out the window pretty fast.
Even things, I'm sure you had the same thing, like relatives, when we're posting online, they just went tyrannical. Yes, you must wear a mask and you must think of others and all this stuff. And it's like there's no science behind that. First off, God wouldn't call us to do that. And these were, relatives who were grew up in the church. Their dad was one of my cousins. Their dad was a pastor. And it's like, uh, where do you get this? And it was just like, and that's the problem here with a lot of the churches that they complied. They were all, in and just, they weren't thinking for themselves. They were going by, health and human services, public orders, you name it.
Yeah, it's really shocking how quickly people were willing to um, really just set aside long-standing relationships, principles, very, what I would have considered very close relationships. And it just became instantly, it just became a litmus test and a purity test. And if you weren't like, if you weren't picked, it was just, it was over, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's still to this day, I'm really shocked at what people were willing to destroy in order to be what they thought was acceptable.
Hmm. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it's just like, and it seems like there's no way back. Once when it comes to things like the churches, once they complied, they showed what side they were on. And there's no coming back. I mean, I'm sure maybe some of them did, have remorse for what they did and they changed, but the vast majority are still, doing the same things.
Absolutely. And that's a really important point you bring there. It's when you compromise on one level of truth,
Hmm.
there is there's like it's a real slippery slope. It doesn't stop there. You couldn't just it just you saw people that went from like one position, but then they were like, no, I can't do that because that's not okay. And they went down here, and now you see them, they're like just gone, right? And
Hmm.
that doesn't. There's always the power of redemption, always remains. I'm not the kind of person that believes that if a person made a bad choice there, that I'm forever going to ostracize them or whatever. I always hope and pray for redemption, but with redemption comes repentance, and so there is going to be level of demonstrable change and remorse for what happened. But as far as people compromising on their values and the truth, once you start, there's no going back unless you
Hmm.
really turn from that way.
Yeah. And, when it comes to the politics thing, you and I are not saying that we're against people who are in politics and that there aren't maybe some people that are out there that are making it, at least attempting to make a difference and doing something good, but it's just few and far between. And it's so, it's just, with the games of politics, it's just so hard.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that, yeah, the political game does not is by nature is a short-lived finger in the wind kind of project. So it actually really inhibits deep, thorough dialogue, discussion, and progress in a society.
Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. And where do you see now with what happened in Canada, where do you see the future of your country? And do you see other countries, following suit to be the same way that Canada is? Because this is obviously a worldwide global agenda.
Absolutely. And this is now perceived, I feel, globally as the front lines against any progress that is considered that people would think is progress in the United States right now.
Hmm.
Any pushback that's happening there, they that is where I think they see Canada being on the northern border. It's okay. This is our dam. This is where we can hold it back. We're going to be right there. We're going to be in their face, and we're going to be just you know waiting there.
Hmm. And one thing it's important for people to understand is that we are a voice. We have the power to say, to so-called be the solution by standing against, what we know is, evil in this world and, stand for uh, what is right.
That's right.
Hmm.
It's so important that we understand and are grounded and rooted in righteous principles. Party politics is just, it's not going to be what fixes anything. It just will not. You cannot vote your way to restore our nations. It's going to come and people go, well, what? So you're saying you're just a doomer now? And I say, no, it's just realistically, it goes back to us. We would love to, um, I think everybody would love to outsource that responsibility to somebody else and just say, okay, hey, here, we'll vote you in, you fix this. But the reality is we just need to all get busy. And if it's you and you have one other person that you have influence over, and you begin to walk in truth, live truth, and people ask, well, whose truth? Well, truth is truth. It's what you know to be right.
Hmm.
And stop living lies, stop spreading lies, stop believing lies, stop watching lies. Vote with your wallet, influence people, influence the next generation. That is actually how you shift. God is sovereign. He's going to do what he does in that sense, but he still offers, he offers us a free will aspect to that, right? And
Hmm.
and that's the combination of this. We have a responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's what's key with people, that we all need to understand. We have an individual responsibility. There is no, there's no holy grail to this where you can just uh, touch something and okay, there now it's all fixed. No, this took a long time to get to this, and it's going to take not as long to get back out of it, but it'll take work.
Mm-hmm.
And as the people turn from their ways, God blesses that and he can accelerate the process.
Mm-hmm. Now, in today's day and time, do you think that there is some areas that are waking up or better than other areas, some countries, or do you think it's just everyone across the world is believing the same thing by the majority?
So I think, evil by numbers is generally in the majority and has
Mm-hmm.
typically always been that way, largely by numbers. But the old saying goes, one man and God are always in majority, right? Um, that can be seen as a cliche comment, but it's true. Now, to to exact or enact a revolution, it usually takes about 3.5% of the population on board. And I actually am bullish on the future of the world and the future of our countries. Am realistically dark on the state of the evil that's there, and that's realistic, but I am bullish and positive about how that can be fought back
Mm-hmm.
as long as we focus on what is important. And that's why I'm hammering on that. Everybody clean up your own crib, clean up your life, do what's right. You can't be living any old way and doing whatever and then expecting, you can cast a vote for the right person and somehow this will all be fixed. And it's like, no, um, you need to, we all have a responsibility to do. And so I've just come back from Europe. There's people waking up all across Europe, lots of people.
Sure.
They're
Mm-hmm.
very upset with what's going on. They know something's wrong. The same as in the United States, it's in Canada. Now, is every person that voted conservative in Canada, are they a truth seeker and just want to do the right thing? No, not
No,
necessarily.
not at all.
Is every person that voted for the Liberal Party an evil person? No, I don't. I believe that there's fringes on either side of society that have problems, and in the end, people are looking for something that makes sense and that they can deal with, but they don't know how to express it. So, but I'm just going to give you an example. We had an election. This election was lost, the margin was 43.6% for the Liberal Party, 41.4% for the Conservative Party.
Wow.
This is
Mm-hmm.
not a landslide
No.
by
Mm-hmm.
any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying, strict, if you believe that politics is the answer, even if you did believe that, you could be forgiven for thinking that you came awfully close because it did actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that there's a lot more to that than just the numbers and the percentage, but it's not like Canadians are overwhelmingly just they just want communists or socialists. No, it's a lot more complicated than that. It's very, very close. It's very tight.
Mm-hmm.
These things are really these things are really going down to the wire, and this is an existential fight of good versus evil in different forms, right? So is the Liberal Party evil and the Conservative Party is God's party? No, it's not what I'm suggesting. All I'm saying is in people's minds, there is a representation of what is good and what is evil, right? And so they're going to follow that in lieu of a better example. They're going to pick political parties. That's what they've got right now. And that's
Sure.
why they're disappointed because they don't see a strong, powerful, national, global church that is united, speaking out and leading people. That's what we're missing right now. That's what we're
Mm-hmm.
calling people to do is say, you got to put aside your differences. You got to put aside all your little divisions and everybody does their own little thing. We have a duty right now as Christians. We have to intentionally unite.
Yeah.
That's just what has to happen.
Mm-hmm. And you don't, I mean, you just don't see it. That's the thing. That's the sad thing. And so many people do play into these, games of going by, the narrative of what the mainstream media, the talking heads want them to do, and it's destructive.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. People are really taking, sometimes we're just too good at taking the bait and that's
Hmm.
what they want. They want people to be divided, and that's why our number one message to people is unity. we
Yeah,
have to uh we have to put aside differences. We have to work. This is going to take some real work.
it really is. And the issue too is that we need everyone on board, even if people are into politics, we need them to set aside differences and unite for humanity, so to speak, to save humanity.
Yes, and I think, like I said, I'm optimistic. I believe that that will happen, that this will end well.
Hmm.
But, sometimes the people get the leaders that they deserve. Um,
It's a good
and
point. Yeah. Hmm.
I think that's where we are. In the United States, there's a little more optimism with Trump, but there's a lot that that is left to be desired there as well, in
Hmm.
my opinion. And again, I'm not just trying to cut everybody down that's in power. That's not, there's some things that Mr. Trump's done that I really, really appreciate.
Hmm.
Things like coming out and unequivocally saying there are two genders. There's male and there's female. That's it.
Yep.
These
Hmm.
these are things that do begin the reset um, of what we're talking about right now. Because the reason, quite frankly, Donald Trump has said that is because he's looked around and realized, hey, over half the population um, is would like to see this.
Hmm.
He's not there standing there and 90% of the people are against him and he's saying, hey, there's only two genders. No, he's looking around going, yeah, okay,
Hmm.
I'm going to say this. I'm not denigrating Mr. Trump. I'm saying I don't think he did this out of deep conviction more than he did that, hey, this is going to make me really popular with the right people that I need on my side. And so I'm going to do that.
Hmm. Yeah,
Now,
I know what you
is
mean.
that evil to do? No. He is literally a politician. He needs votes or he's out, right?
Hmm.
So I say, hey, no problem. That's what you are literally in that line of work. I don't diss you for that.
Hmm.
But I'm also not going to outsource my moral compass, foundations, and outlook on what influences what to you just because you said the right thing.
Hmm. And the bottom line is that they do not lord over us, these people, these politicians. We have the ability to think for ourselves, to stand on the word, to stand on what we know is truth.
That's right.
Hmm. So, and what about like things like, because we're being hit with it too, shortages, inflation. Are you guys feeling it like we are or no?
Absolutely. I mean, inflation has absolutely ravaged our country. Affordability crisis is everywhere here. Housing, as I mentioned, is out of control. The Canadian dream, which was really a very close copy of the American dream, I lived it. I got married fairly young, 19 years ago. And when my wife and I got married, I had a full-time job. She worked part-time. Then when we had children, she hasn't worked. Well, she's worked full-time. She just hasn't had a salaried job outside the home.
Hmm.
Um, so I call her a full-time domestic engineer. And we could afford to do that. We bought a house. We had children. We had, two cars. And we worked our way up. We
Hmm.
bought homes, fixed them up, sold them, built homes, did things like that. Just worked our way up the ladder. And that future is not there right now for my children. My oldest son is now 16, 17 this year, and the same home that my wife and I bought 19 years ago for 140,000 is now 400,000.
Sure. Hmm.
The same job that I had that paid me $27 an hour then now pays you maybe 35.
Hmm.
So you can do the math.
Oh,
They're
yeah, it doesn't add up.
No, you're going to need a full double income, which means then you can't have children. Or if you do, you're going to be penalized to get into a mortgage on a house that's it's right up at about three times of what it was originally. These are starter homes, mind you. These are very small, ways to start in a small town.
Hmm.
The food, it's doubled in 5 years easily. My grocery bill is through the roof. Um, Fuel's up. All of these things. It's absolutely, I believe, deliberately slamming the middle class because A country with a strong middle class cannot be conquered easily.
Mm-hmm.
A country with a decimated middle class is ripe for the picking.
Mm-hmm. And do you think this is, I would assume that you do, but let me get your take on this. Do you think this is all by design? And it's so, one thing that's so sad to see is like you and I take it, we're not into, watching the news or following the narratives or anything, but you get these talking heads like Bill Gates and he's coming on the, late night talk shows and he's flat out telling you, you know, and people are eating him up and it's like you're listening to a guy that has knowingly said that he wants the world depopulated,
Yep,
or people like Klaus Schwab. How can you think that these guys who are super rich to begin with are on our side? It's mind-boggling.
absolutely. Um, in my mind, there's no question. I don't think every person in government, I don't think people even putting in all of these policies even understand the gravity of them many times. There's a center, they do this in a way that they really break the chain of command or the traceability of where these concepts come from. Like we can trace them back because you can do basic math. But a lot
Hmm.
of people that are just used to consuming information that's given to them without verifying, it's difficult to immediately put the two and two together. To me, it's very clear there are policies that are created and floated by a very small group of people that have some really, really bad intentions. In fact, most of them, I believe, are full-fledged Satanist death cult members.
Hmm.
The evidence is there. I mean, just you start looking at what people are doing, Bohemian Grove, and just
Thank
on
you.
and on and on, right? These are what they're doing with medical assistance in dying, abortion, transgenderism. This is all marks of a death cult.
Hmm. Pushing vaccines too would be right in there.
100%. Yeah, and it's all part of that, right? So they are actively looking for ways to leverage people that are in power and leverage their ignorance many
Hmm.
times and their desire to make a name for themselves or do something that makes them stick out. And so there's people that float concepts. Hey, maybe we should get this kind of bill passed. This could come along. This could make you look at this would do good. I've got some donors lined up that would really support you if you. I don't think most of the frontline politicians are many times even understanding the scope or the real ramifications of many of the laws that they put into place because they are so focused on what the popularity contest that they're involved in their mind is going to bring them if they get this stuff done.
Hmm.
That's the way I see it. Um, but the strings of these puppeteers is what's being is pulled way in the background, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, that's where it gets really complicated and really dark really quickly. I don't know if you watched the interview with Tucker Carlson and my favorite politician probably in North America right now, Thomas Massie.
Oh yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I just really like Mr. and respect Mr. Massey. Not to mention,
Hmm.
he also reached out personally and supported us in any way that he could during COVID. And
Oh, did he? Wow. No, I
yes,
mean, I'm not
absolutely.
surprised one bit. That's great. Hmm.
Yeah, he's a solid. Sadly, his wife passed away last year. He's had a rough year. There's been some, it came coincidentally at the time when he really exposed some things in the government. So I'm hoping that it's not what it appears to be. But either way, Mr. Massey mentioned that each Congress member has a designated AIPAC representative that's responsible for pushing policy, encouraging them how to
Yep.
vote, telling them what's at stake, how to not be an
Hmm.
anti-Semite, all of this, right? And I know we're getting into the weeds here and people are going to disagree with me, but in much the same way, I think that's where we're just scratching the surface. If we understood that there is for each major politician that has influence, there is an AIPAC member, there is a big pharma member, there is a green energy, green scam, something
Hmm.
representative.
Thank you.
These lobbyists are very busy, they're very focused, and they're very grassroots. They don't come to you as being from the WEF or from whatever
Exactly.
organization that raises flags. These are simply grassroots people because they really deregulate bureaucratically the whole lobbying industry to make it very personal. It's just your friend.
Hmm.
It's someone that you know. It's someone that has the best interests of the Americans at heart, Canadians, whatever. And I think that's really the essence of how these policies really maintain their momentum.
Hmm. And I think it's important to point out that we're not the only ones saying this, that this is part of the waking up process, is that people are realizing this. And then you get bigger voices like maybe like a Candace Owens who reaches a larger, audience than even you and I do. And it just, and this is actually, I think, uniting people to say, hey, no, we don't want this going on?
That's right.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Candace has taken a lot of heat, and I agree with a lot of what she said. If I didn't agree with it, I would still defend her right to say it, which is what I find particularly egregious that people on the so-called right
Hmm.
are very quickly motivated to exert the same cancel culture
Hmm.
on people that speak out when it hits their favorite issue that they disagree with you on. So I think it's important that people maintain and obtain actual parity on their beliefs because even if I disagree with you, I should defend to the death your right to say it.
Hmm.
But free speech isn't nearly as free as people profess it to be.
No, and they give you platforms like X where they say you can roam and do whatever you want, but even other platforms who claim, oh, we're getting, remember Meta said, Zuckerberg, we're getting rid of fact checking, we're getting rid of this and that, and we're all still being censored left and right on those platforms, or shadow banned, you name it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's and like shadow banning, similar tactics like shadow banning are what are very popular because you can't really put your finger on it. I can't
Hmm.
say definitively that if they weren't doing this, I would reach X number of people. Although I know that somehow on certain platforms, my reach is very, very low compared to the people that follow me. So I
Hmm.
know something's up, but I think they do that on purpose in ways that you can just simply, you just can't pin them on it. Like you're just kind of lost, right? Because like, okay, something's
Hmm.
up, but I don't know what's up, right?
Yeah. So, and another thing too is you don't see that one of the major issues is why don't we, if this wasn't about, special interest groups or you name it, why don't you see more politicians? I'm sure there's some across the world that are speaking out, but why don't you see them talking about died suddenly? How many people died suddenly from these shots?
Well, again, back to my view. But my earlier point is that, and this is what I firmly believe, is that it would not be popular with their big pharma handler or lobbyist that is
Hmm.
dedicated to them, and that they simply, I think in many cases, people just want to live. I think they're under threat of their lives or their families' lives or their family's welfare. Um, so, yeah, I think there's just a lot of fear around telling the truth.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, here's a question for you that, is has always, rattled my mind. With these shots, people did not like people were, excluded from working, you name it. Some places they couldn't enter. Do you think because, and scripture says so do you think that that is that these, COVID shots were a portion of the mark of the beast? Break that down for me because I'd like to get your insights.
Well, I don't, my personal view is that the mark of the beast is not necessarily one single literal happening,
Yes.
but that it's actually a
Hmm.
spiritual state. Um, and I think that in many ways, the COVID shots were part of a physical manifestation of this spiritual happening and event, right? That I don't think it
Hmm.
happens just in one day or in one event,
No.
but it had a lot, I think it purposely had a lot of those um, aspects in it on purpose by the people that designed it because the people that are trying to subvert Christianity and subverting prophecy are the people that understand prophecy much better than most Christians do. And so Satan believes and trembles, right?
Hmm.
And that's what people should never forget is that these he's influencing people to do certain things and hide the truth in plain sight or do things that so that you will believe um okay, the whole concept is don't believe what you see. Your eyes are lying to you, right? What you're no. And if you can get people conditioned to do that where they're more susceptible to listening to people telling them what they're seeing versus seeing what they're seeing,
Hmm.
then you've won the war, right? So I'm digressing a little bit from your point, but I think that really is part of the mark of the beast. I consider this whole system a beastly system, a system of the
Oh,
beast.
without a shadow of
Okay.
doubt.
And is a mark if you are a component and part of that beast. And the vaccine can be a part of it. Now, is every person that's vaccinated, have they taken the mark of the beast? I would not say that. I think people unwittingly did many things that they regret. I think they were sold a bill of goods. Some people just were trying to just make it work and didn't know and they were living in fear. But the bottom line is that the way and the method in which it was, the methodology behind it, the fear and all that, that was a mark of a beastly
Hmm.
rollout. There's no question. Preparing people, taking advantage of where they'd taken people and preparing them to take them further.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I think you summed it up, rather well. And also with things that are going on, another thing that is going on is the shift to AI. What do you think about that in the future and our future as humans?
So AI is interesting. It's complicated in some ways. I'm not a person that is against AI as a concept because
Hmm.
I use it on a daily basis. I use it for work. I use it to speed up things that I do. What, just like all these other things, these are tools. This is technological advancement. It's like you don't want to live in perpetual fear of a cell phone or a car or whatever, and some people
No.
did. But in the hands of the wrong people, AI is frightening. There's no question.
Hmm.
And that's again to my point is we need to focus on who's got control of things, where is the source of the stream, the faith that influences the culture, that influences the politics. Let's get good people in. Let's get the right people in. I'm not saying voted in. Let's make the right people influential.
Hmm.
And then what happens is we saw that in the past many times society wasn't perfect, but there was good things happen because there was order and people just simply didn't allow evil to triumph to the extent that it triumphs now. And that's where we need to move towards. I'm not going to say go back to because I don't think going back ever accomplishes anything. It's how we move forward in the right context.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I think that, we just have to continue to be out there speaking, to be out there, being a light, exposing truths, standing our grounds, because that is what it takes. And more people, will come to understand what we understand and, uh, things will change. That's how it happens.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Well, I really appreciate you, coming on the podcast. If someone wants to reach out to you or follow you, what is the best platform? I'll make sure to add any links that you'd like me to add to the description.
Sure. On X, you can follow me, Herbert Hildebrandt. Username is at HERBERANDT. So kind of a combination of my first and last name, Herbert Rant. And on Facebook, Herbert Hildebrandt. You can follow me there. Those are my two key, also, yeah, Facebook, Instagram, and X. Uh, there's some of my personal life mixed in with some of my gardening hobbies, my
Nice.
political
Hmm.
views, the occasional column that I publish that gets published here in some of the local media in Canada,
Hmm.
things like that.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it, Herbert. Such a great guest, and the world needs more people like you out there. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Much love.